See some funny out on the shelf posts, and some of them are educational as well. Go to our 7 Seas Health Initiative Facebook page and like, share, comment, interact, however you feel. And now we're just going to do introductions. So if you want to, we'll start maybe in person and then go around, say your name, title, organization, and then a winter tradition. And then after we go around in person, I'll call them people on Zoom just so we have our order. So I'll go first. My name is Nikki. I'm a part of the 7 Seas Health Initiative, and I'm a health educator here at the La Crosse County Health Department. And a winter tradition that we always do is kind of basic, but decorating our Christmas tree, and that has been one of my favorite things since I was little. And my brother and I get new ornaments every year that I always look forward to. So that's mine. I am Katie Bloom. I'm public health specialist at Jackson County Public Health, so I'm Vancouver. And can't think of like a tradition that we have. I guess like used to always go to my aunt and uncle's on Christmas Eve and then my parents on Christmas Day, but you know when you grow up that changes. So but yeah, this year I'll be back at my parents for Christmas Day. So looking forward to it.
My name is Rachel King, and I work for the La Crosse County Health Department in Health Education. My favorite winter tradition is whenever we would start to do all the decorating, my parents have a nativity scene that was always wrapped up in tissue paper. So we didn't know, but each of the kids had to pick one, and that was they got to put up. And we were always looking for the angel. And so when we got to use the angel was the favorite that year. But yeah, that was our little tradition.
So hi, my name is Jamie McLean. I am a here at the La Crosse County Health Department, and my favorite winter tradition, it's probably kind of more of like winter into spring tradition, but my dad and I will go spring skiing, usually out in Colorado if we can, but even locally, and it's always fun going skiing with him and you know having that father-daughter time, even though I'm now an adult.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Lenz, also known as Bree. I'm a public health educator for the Trimble County Health Department, also a member of the 7 Seas Health Initiative. A holiday tradition is on my dad's side of the family on Christmas Day. We always go bowling and to a tiny bit.
I'm Barb Schultz. I'm a retired counselor from across the district. And my tradition would probably be doing a lot of baking right now to give gifts to friends and so on. I really enjoy that.
So Judy Sabo, my favorite, or one of our many traditions is actually with our kids and grandchildren. We hide the pickle in the tree, and then it's a scavenger hunt to find this tiny, we find the tiniest of pickles and hide it in the tree, and then the first one gets to distribute the gifts, and we take turns. And so Christmas gift giving lasts hours, because the kids are always, they have to go out and then we rehide the pickle, then they find a gift and then they go out, we have to rehide the pickle. This takes all morning long. And I knew it was important when the kids asked at last year for picnics, they asked if they could have their own pickle ornament. So
I'm Terry Visger. I am a former retired lacrosse teacher, and I am a storyteller. My favorite tradition is cutting down the Christmas tree, and we do that with the Zavos. We did it initially on our farm, but now all the trees have gotten too big, so now we find a tree of rock and cut it down.
Okay. April, you're first on my screen. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm April Anderson. I work for UW-Madison Division of Extension as a health and well-being educator and food-wise coordinator. And one of my favorite winter traditions is to make the homemade sugar cookies and frost and decorate them with my mom. And then sometimes my nieces help with that effort as well. My nieces are 8 and 10. I just have to say on a side note, and then my sister-in-law and my brother are expecting twins. Her C-section is scheduled for this Friday, so I'll be an auntie to a little boy and a little girl very soon. Some more addition to the family. So excited about that. Had to share that on the side.
Awesome. Debbie.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Fisher, and I'm the Director of Southwest Alliance for Tobacco Prevention and Youth to Youth for Change. We are in Beloit, Wisconsin. I can't think. One of our favorite tradition is baking, and my teenage granddaughters even drove down this year to bake with us. And then the other thing we always do when we have our Christmas together is we have a birthday cake for Jesus.
Sarah.
I'm Sarah Hewitt from Vernon County Health Department, public health nurse, and just getting together with family and celebrating the reason for the season is a great winter tradition.
Angela.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angela Gillette, and I am the site coordinator for Patch in La Crosse, Wisconsin. At some point during the holiday season, one of our traditions is to set up a game table right in front of the fireplace, and usually it turns into like a cribbage tournament. Sometimes we'll play like Tripoli or poker, but it's always a fun tradition. Like a family gets into town and we have some sort of game night next to the fire.
Thank you. Teal.
Hi, everyone. So one of my favorite winter traditions is actually at the end of winter. So my family does this really special thing for Easter. And I know some people are like, is that really winter? But we get snow sometimes on Easter. And so that's always how we kind of celebrate the very end of that cold season. And what we do is not only do we always decorate eggs, but we make sure to not boil a couple of them, but we still decorate them. And then every year someone has to grab one egg out of the bowl and we all crack them on our heads at the exact same time. And one or two people always get like yoked. And like, it's just one of my favorite, funnest little things. And we're doing it with the little kids and they're like, this is super gross. And I'm like, yes, it's just so fun.
That's an awesome one. Julie.
Whoops, sorry, whoops. I'm still laughing about that one. That's great. I'm Julie Dietz. I'm a public health nurse for La Crosse County Health Department. I love to cut down a Christmas tree. Just did that this past weekend, and it's amazing. You think you have just the perfect tree, and then you get home and you trim the branches and find out you got a big bare spot. But that's okay. I also really like going to late mass at church with the lights and the candles, and it's pretty cool. So thank you.
Miranda.
Hey everyone, my name is Miranda Phelps McGuire. I work to staff the Dane County Alliance Against Commercial Tobacco, housed in Public Health, Madison and Dane County. One of my favorite things to do over the Christmas break is to travel from the south end of the state up to the north end where my parents live in Hayward, Wisconsin. It's always nice to walk through the woods and out onto the lakes and look for all the woodland creatures who live up there. It really is a special time. So great to be here and nice to see everyone, except for you can't see me because my video has not been working today. So I apologize for that.
It's okay, we still see your pretty picture on there. David.
Yeah, I'm David. I am the Youth and Communications Coordinator for the REACH Coalition in Kaukauna. Winter traditions is same tradition I have year round, where I play a bunch of disc golf. Just during the winter, it involves a bit more layers.
I see Paula on the chat. She can't unmute, but she's from Patch, and her winter tradition is to exchange books and chocolate on Christmas Eve. And let's see here. Bridget also put in the chat that her name's Bridget, and she's the public health educator at Greene County Public Health, and her favorite tradition is to bake cookies with her mom and aunt, which they just did this past Sunday. And next we have Kat.
Everybody, I work with also the Health and Wellbeing Department over at the UW Madison Division of Extension. I'm a co-chair for our Substance Use Prevention Coalition. And tradition, my favorite tradition is we started it when we have our first granddaughter. We decorate a tree outside for the birds. And so we've been doing that now for 11 years, and it's always really special. We string popcorn and cranberries, and we roll pine cones and peanut butter and bird seed and stick oranges out and that kind of thing. And it's festive, and I don't have to clean it up in the house.
Good mother. Meg?
I'm Meg Husiki with Southwest Alliance, and favorite tradition is just spending time with family. I have a very big family, so the holidays is crazy, but I always enjoy spending time with my family.
Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jenny Camilera. I work with the Northwoods Tobacco Free Coalition in northeastern part of the state. My favorite winter tradition, gosh, there's so many. I would just say that my kids are involved with the Christmas program at our church every year. And it's across a generational program. So they it's a lot of youth, but they try to involve all generations and get them working together and spending time together. And so I just really think that's a really neat, and it always comes together so nice.
Thank you. Imelda?
Hi, my name's Imelda, and I am with Youth for Change. And I think my favorite kind of tradition that we have is sledding with my family. We live right by a school that has a big hill. So we like to go there, and it's always super fun when there is snow.
Right. Alicia?
Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Basil with the South Central Alliance for Tobacco Prevention Coalition. My favorite memory or tradition is we usually try to go to a midnight church service. And so it's just a lot of fun walking out at the end when you're super tired, but it's just really quiet outside, especially if there's snow and stuff on the ground. So it's probably one of my favorite traditions.
Thank you. Mickey?
Hello, my name is Mickey. I'm the public health educator with Buffalo County. One of my favorite winter traditions is I have two older brothers, and my oldest brother was born on Christmas Eve. So my parents really struggled to find birthday things that were open, and they ended up finding a indoor mini golf course and a Chinese food restaurant. And even though we're all adults now, we still mini golf and have Chinese food every day or every Christmas Eve for my brother's birthday. So that's always been really fun for us.
Josh Benson?
Howdy, I am Josh. I'm Youth Engagement Coordinator for Juneau County. I don't know so much if it's a tradition or rather it's something we end up having to do every year, but it's always fun around about this time, helping my grandpa cut up a bunch of wood for their wood burner at their house. Just kind of ends up being a family, everyone shows up randomly and pretends to work hard even though we're really not type of situation. So it's pretty fun every year.
Nice. Israel?
Hi, my name is Israel Morales. I am project coordinator at Youth to Youth. As far as Christmas traditions or winter traditions, getting together with the family on the 24th is usually a tradition for me instead of the 25th.
Eric Timmons?
Hi, I'm Eric Timmons. I'm the marketing and strategic analyst with La Crosse County. And I grew up in Ireland. And so one of my favorite traditions was going back to Ireland for Christmas, which I haven't been able to do for the last couple of years due to COVID, unfortunately.
Kathleen?
Hi, I'm Kathy Seberg with the KRW Tobacco Free Coalition.
I'm actually here with my replacement today. I'm leaving. This is Sonia Peterson. She's with me. And my favorite tradition is just being with my family.
And my favorite tradition is on Christmas Eve, we go to the church where my grandfather used to be a pastor. And then after that service, we go to their house for a traditional Norwegian meal, which consists of all very white foods, potato soup, clam chowder. Yeah, lefse, of course.
Pickled fish.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you, nice to meet you. Did I miss anybody on here? Okay, with that, I will introduce our first speaker, which is Terry. And I hope you guys can see me. I can't see myself on here. So, Terry Bisker is a professional storyteller, university instructor, and former second grade teacher. She has been telling stories all of her life. Her mom just told them lies. And Terry told stories in her own classroom for many years, and she now provides storytelling performances for preschool through adult audiences. And she also gives workshops for teachers, businesses, and organizations, and has a storytelling to writing residency available for elementary age children. Terry is also one of the 3 Boomer Grads, a performance group who combines video, acting, and storytelling to reflect on growing up in the 50s and 60s. They have 2 shows, Remembering While We Still Can, and What My Mother Never Told Me, that were hugely successful in La Crosse, and they would love to bring these shows to other areas. So without further ado, here's our speaker, Terry.
Thank you very much, Lydia. I realized I haven't checked my website on that part for a long time because the Boomer Broads don't perform anymore. One of us actually has passed away, and we did 4 shows and wrote a book. So I definitely need to change that on my website. So I'm going to start with a traditional kind of a Zen story. Long ago in Japan, it was the tradition that if a wanderer was in need of food or a place to sleep, they would go to a dojo, a school of martial arts. And there, after challenging the students to a fake fight, they would be given food and lodging. And so it was that an old storyteller could tell by the setting sun and the growl in his stomach that it was time to find such a place. He didn't go far when he came to a dojo, but this wasn't just any dojo. This was the dojo of the most famous samurai in all of Japan. He went to the door and knocked. It was opened by a young man. Konnichiwa. I would like to challenge your master. Oh man, challenge the first year students. Then we'll give you food and a place to sleep. I would like to challenge your master. Old man, to challenge the master means a real fight. Challenge the second tier students. They use fake swords, a fake fight. I challenge your master. And so word was sent to the great samurai. He stood and put on his gi. He wrapped his long obi round and round his waist. And then he picked up his sharp and heavy katana. And then he went to meet his challenger. The 2 men met in the middle of the room, one tall and strong, the other old and bent. They bowed. The great samurai stepped back. He pulled out his katana, ready to strike. When the old man said, far away in a beautiful mountain village, a young girl is lying by a stream. She's crying. The great samurai put down his katana. His students clamored, Sensei, Sensei, what are you doing? You would have won. He turned to them and he said, were you not listening? Did you not hear when I said that in battle you must stay focused? You must be in the moment. But this man, this old man, he took me to a place I have never been to before. And that is the power of storytelling. Well, I believe in that power. I believe in that power in all aspects of our lives, from entertainment to business to education to families. And so today I'm going to take one more story, and I hope that I will take you to a place that you've never been to before, a time that most of you have never been to before. I'm going to take you to Southern Illinois, to a little town called Murfreesboro, except we say Murfreesboro when you're down there, and a time that had significance in the United States. And I hope that you'll see that it's something that changes you when you hear a story. My mother was always giving advice like, put the dishes in the dishwasher before you go to bed. That way, if there's a fire, the house will be clean for the firemen. Or she'd say, if you have a sexual urge, eat an orange instead. I listened sometimes to her advice, but there was one thing that she said that I did pay attention to. She said, listen to the elders in your life. They will have things to teach you. And that was especially true for me in a small town in Southern Illinois where I spent my summers visiting my grandmother. She owned a restaurant. When we were there, we'd get to the restaurant, the kitchen cafe, about 7 o'clock in the morning. Mama, that's what I called her. We'd have a bowl of oats, eat a good breakfast. I'd grab a glazed donut. And then after choosing the pie that I would have after my noon meal and hiding it away so they didn't sell it to someone, plan ahead, I would be off for the streets of Murfreesboro every day, seek adventure. First, I'd go to the Woolworth store where my great aunt Kat worked behind the candy counter. Choose a job you love. The whole time I talked to Kat, she would be nibbling on chocolate-covered raisins and nonpareils, but she never offered me any because that would be stealing, and honesty's the best policy. Well, after that, I'd go up Walnut Street to my Aunt Imie's beauty shop. There I'd help out by sweeping up hair and cleaning combs, or else I was the guinea pig for Sharon the apprentice. I was the only 8-year-old with plucked eyebrows and a twice weekly manicure. It's never too early to start a beauty regimen. But mostly, I listened to the conversations of the women there, especially Pearl. She was one of the other beauticians. She owned a monkey, definitely a life goal. And she had a slew of ex-boyfriends, not a good goal. And later in life, I was reminded of her from the TV show, The Flow, the Kiss My Grits waitress. Attitude's important. About 11 o'clock, I'd leave the beauty shop and head to the courthouse where my Uncle Gov was the sheriff. I'd take the elevator to the 3rd floor where he and Aunt Imie lived and where the jail was housed. As soon as those elevator doors opened, I would race to the kitchen where you had to pass the door that led to the jail. And I knew right away I never wanted that to happen to me. Well, after talking to the maid and the cook there for a while, I'd start to get hungry and I'd head back over to the kitchen cafe and sit at the lone table in the kitchen, the cooking area, and watch the action there. Hazel was always at the big black stove frying up something. She was a large woman, her brown hair done up in a bun. She didn't talk much, but whew, could that woman sweat. Hard work is God's work. And then there was Lou. Lou was tall and skinny, and she talked all the time about her kids and her grandkids and putting up Pit Lily the night before. I loved to listen to Lou talk. Not so much for what she had to say, but for the click. Because Lou had false teeth that didn't fit right. And about every second or third sentence, they'd fall and you could hear it. Or sometimes, every so often, she'd raise up her arms, armpit hair. She was the only woman at the time that didn't shave under her arms. And for some reason, the sight of that hair could just make my day. It's all right to be different. And then there was my grandmother, my pretty little grandmother, standing at the steam table, dishing up the plates and the platters. She always came to work all dressed up. Good dress, earrings, necklace, sometimes a brooch. Take pride in your job. She had that blue-gray hair that older women often had in those days. Got it done once a week at Aunt Imie's. And no matter how hot it got in that unair-conditioned kitchen, standing over that steam table, it never flopped or frizzed or frazzled. And she hardly ever went into the dining room to cool off like I always did. No, she was always standing there like the queen. Everyone always said that my grandmother was a good cook. Couldn't tell by me. I never ate an entire meal that my grandmother made. When I was in Southern Illinois, we ate every meal Monday through Saturday at the Kitchen Cafe. On Sundays, when it was closed, we went to wherever Anya and Gov were, and we ate with them. Or sometimes, maybe 2-3 times a summer, we'd go to the barbecue place and get real Southern barbecue. The barbecue place was owned by a colored man. That's what we said then, colored, and unless we said something stronger. It was down in the colored part of town by the bottoms of the big muddy river. I suppose you could have eaten inside, but we never did. Momo would go to the window to order, and I'd sit in the car. And then after a bit, she'd come and sit with me, air conditioner on, until the owner came with the bags of food and give it to us. Then we'd go off and share with Amy and Gov. One time when we were sitting there, I asked my grandmother if the colored folks ever came to the Kitchen Cafe to eat. I'd seen them at the back door delivering produce and stuff, but I'd never seen any in the dining room. And she turned to me and she said, "Why, you hush now, Terry Lynn. You know they know their place." Well, I didn't exactly know what she meant by that, but I knew I shouldn't ask any further. Children should be seen and not heard. But we knew lots of colored folks, the maid and the cook at the courthouse, the lady that cleaned for my grandmother. So the only thing that I could figure at the time that she meant was that they liked their place, the barbecue place, like I liked the Kitchen Cafe, and I left it at that. And then one day I was sitting at that lone table in the kitchen, waiting my turn to eat, paying customers first, when Uncle Gov walked in. He hardly ever came to the Kitchen Cafe to eat. He always ate at the courthouse after helping to serve the prisoners. But he sat down at the table, and then Momo left the steam table in the middle of the noon hour and came and sat next to him. Lou took over for him. And then they told me to move away. Well, I went a little ways away, and they were so intent on their conversation, they didn't seem to notice. But I was insulted. I was always allowed to listen to grown-ups talk. I liked listening to the grown-ups talk, especially Uncle Gov. I'd learned most of my colorful language from him, like "I'll be a suck-egg mule" and "the little packer would," and other things that my mother didn't like at all. He was always joking and laughing and talking politics. John Kennedy had taken a nap on Aunt Imie's couch in the courthouse when he was campaigning for president. My dad had voted for Nixon, but I wanted Kennedy because Gov did. But on this day, he wasn't joking. They were talking very seriously. I didn't really understand it, but it was something about the colored podiatrist in town and how he was going to come to the Kitchen Cafe to test something out. I didn't know what that might be, but I could see that it had them worried, concerned, maybe even scared. I'd seen that podiatrist lots of times. He had a little office on the side street across from the Woolworth. If he was standing outside when I went by, he'd always say, "Morning, Missy." Well, I judged that man wrong. I decided right then and there, the next time I saw him, I was going to walk on the other side of the street. And then, about a week later, I was sitting in the dining room trying to cool off. I knew I wasn't going to be there very much longer. It was right at noontime, and the place was really filling up. It was loud with talking and laughing, mostly men. I was sitting at one of only 3 empty stools at the counter. The tables, there were the men from the electric company and the phone company, office workers from the courthouse, and of course the county road workers. They were there all the time. They'd come in the morning for breakfast, back at 10 o'clock for coffee and donuts, and back at noon for dinner. And then the door opened and Uncle Gov walked in. But he sat at a table with some other men, and I knew not to disturb. And then the door opened again, and in walked the colored podiatrist. And that whole room got completely quiet as every eye watched as he walked across to the counter and sat down at the stool next to me. I looked at Uncle Gov. He was scowling. I'd never seen that look on his face before. He jerked his head to tell me to get out of the way, but it was like I was frozen. And then 2 of the county road workers got up from their table. They hadn't finished eating yet. They hadn't even ordered pie. And they didn't walk to the cash register to pay. They walked towards me. I saw Gov stand up, and then from the corner of my eye, I saw the swinging door from the kitchen opened, and out walked my grandmother. She came towards me too. I thought, oh, am I in trouble? But when she got to me, she turned her back, crossed her arms over her chest, and she stared at those two big, burly county road workers. They stood there staring at each other for, I don't know how long, a moment, a minute. And then finally, one of the workers put his eyes down and went back to his table. And after a bit, the other did the same. My grandmother stood there the entire time that the podiatrist ordered, ate his chicken and dumplings, went to the cash register and paid, and then went out the door. Gov got up and stood in front of it. And that room stayed quiet for another moment, minute, and then it erupted in loud, angry voices. I learned a lot that day. I learned that the podiatrist was not a bad man, and that my Uncle Gov would uphold the law, no matter how he'd been raised. But mostly I learned from my grandmother, my pretty little grandma. I learned that to be brave and to stand up to even great odds for things and people that you believe in and that you love. And that's the end of my story. So as you're going to find out about storytelling, I hope it is something that you remember. I hope it's something that you see a different time, a different place, that it took you somewhere else. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I can sit here all day listening to it.
And if you like storytelling, sorry, but we have a storytelling festival every year in July. Now at the Pump House, like July 22nd or 23rd, I'm not sure, it's 2 days. We bring in internationally known storytellers, and it's great fun at the Pump House in La Crosse in July. So thanks a lot. I have to go.
Okay, thank you again. Our next presenter is Teal. So I will introduce Teal. Teal Graylord is a storyteller and qualitative researcher who specializes in cultural communication with community groups from diverse racial, ethnic, geographic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. She holds 2 communication degrees and a Master of Public Health and Health Equity. She spent over 10 years as a health educator and community organizer working with local communities throughout Wisconsin. She joins us today from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, where she serves as a tobacco disparities and health equity coordinator. So welcome, Teal.
Thank you, Nikki. And thank you, Judy. I really appreciate you hosting this retreat and bringing me in to talk about storytelling, which is a topic area that is near and dear to my heart. And so kind of the purpose of today is I'm going to walk through just some cultural communication factors, because as a health educator, I do believe it's important for all of us to know our own communication style and how we connect with others. And then we're actually going to look at how to build and tell a story using a CDC model. And then the very end of this, we're going to do a think, pair, share skill-based practice, right? Because storytelling is not only a public health tool, right, but it's a skill and it's something that we can practice and get better at over time. So with that, I'm just going to dive right in. I actually wanted to start with this idea that storytelling is important, and not only because it is a public health practice, right, because it is a basic building block, right? Stories are how humans make sense of the world. It's how we make sense of our place within it. It is how we connect to one another, right? It is how we share our experiences, how we share education. It's how we share culture, right? And reinforce social bonds, right? Again, not only is this an evidence-based strategy, right? But it has these real life applications and these real life benefits. And so what I'm actually going to do now is explain why storytelling is a public health practice. So public health communication at its core, right, is the art and technique of informing, influencing, and motivating individuals, institutions, and public health audiences about just literally any kind of public health issue or topic out there. For us, it may be tobacco, but really it's about anything. And not only is this a building block, but really, I don't see us doing anything within the realm of public health without it involving communication and storytelling. If you want to secure funding, if you want to write a grant, right? If you want to recruit people to join your coalition, right? If you want to increase buy-in with politicians, right? Or your community or resource or service organizations, right? If you want to educate people within your community, if you want to create resources or tools, if you want to create media campaigns, and promotion, all of that not only involves communication, but it involves storytelling at its core. And so I want to start off today by acknowledging that you are already a storyteller. Like, it might not be a label that you assign to yourself, but it is a skill that you use within this work already. And again, it's a skill that we can get better at. Now, I do want to acknowledge that there is a barrier to storytelling as a public health practice. I'm just going to acknowledge this, right? Because some stories and some experiences are valued more than others within public health and within our knowledge production systems, like research or education or government, okay? What that means is some people's experiences are considered more valid. Some types of information are considered more valid. For example, we really love data. We love numbers. Quantitative data is valued way more than qualitative data, which is stories. And then once you start to bring in some of those cultural elements, like what culture group is telling this story? We have culture groups here in Wisconsin. Native American communities, for example, have had an oral tradition literally since pre-colonization. And yet those stories, that form of knowledge production, tends to not be as valued, right? It tends to not be lifted up by our institution because we go, well, that's not evidence-based. And even when it is evidence-based, because it is evidence-based, right? Within our practices, our knowledge production, our research practices, we have this thing called statistical violence, where we go, well, if it doesn't fit the norm, the culture, the expectations of how we produce information, we don't want to count it. In fact, I have not only been working in tobacco for a long time, but I was a researcher on the largest tobacco research study ever done in the world, not just the United States, Wisconsin, with pregnant and postpartum women. We studied over 2,000 women who talked to us about what their experience was like smoking and trying to quit smoking while pregnant and postpartum. No women of color, none, were included in our final data analysis. Not a single one, because we didn't have the sample size needed. In fact, in one specific case, we had 98 Asian women from across Wisconsin who participated in the study, and we said their stories and their experiences do not count because we didn't reach 100. This is very common. It's a common thing within public health. This is a common thing within storytelling. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because I think we have a bit of a bias, right, in the field of public health. And I really want to argue the idea that not only is this a useful practice to you, but it's useful to your communities, right? And it's useful to our field as a whole. So with that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain some really kind of core concepts about cultural communication, which is how we understand ourselves, how we understand others, how we connect, and how we communicate, okay? So I'm actually going to start out by giving just some context. So one thing to recognize, right, is that in the United States, like, we are a melting pot. Like, we all learned that in school, right, or growing up. Like, I think that's common language, right, or imagery that we have from our childhoods or our histories or our backgrounds, right? And the reason we call the United States a melting pot is because it's really diverse, right? Like, we have all these different communities, we have all these different cultures, and as a result, we have all these different communication styles. And most people, I think, don't tend to recognize that, right? And so not only do I want you to walk away from this today knowing what your personal communication style is, right? But I want you to think about how it's different from others, and how, by knowing that, you can actually improve your public health practice of relating and connecting and talking to others. That's my goal, right? So I'm going to start here today with low context culture. So low context culture is actually a very dominant American culture model, right? It's a very professional model. It's a very white model. So low context culture is that you say exactly what you mean. You say it directly. There is no other meaning. You don't bring a lot of emotion into it. Like, just what you say is what you mean, right? And within this context, right, like time tends to be really important. Like whatever you produce is really important. For example, if you're going into a meeting with someone, you know what that meeting is, you know what you're going to get out of that meeting, you stay on track and you check the boxes, right? That is low context culture. And again, we see that in professionalism, right? But when we contrast that to high context culture, right? High context culture is more complex. High context culture says that there's a lot of emotion in it. It's really indirect. There's a lot of storytelling, right? What you say is not necessarily what you mean. There can be hidden meanings. Body language matters. The relationships matter. What you produce isn't as important as the process in which you engage with things, right? And I say this because, speaking for myself, I come from a high context culture. I come from a collectivist society that values this. In fact, this high context culture tends to be seen more in collectivist cultures. For example, Hmong communities here in Wisconsin, that's a high context culture, right? Whereas, again, going back to low context culture, like I don't belong to a low context culture within my family, which means that I have to code switch. I have to navigate this within professional spaces, because for anyone who knows me, and there are some of you on this call who do, I talk a lot and I tell a lot of stories and I bring a lot of emotion into it. This is why. And we have people not only at a community level, but at a professional level and within the field of public health who don't all communicate the same way. Because some of us come from low context cultures and some of us come from high context cultures, and it's all valid. It's all valid, right? But it's a difference in the room. Another thing that I want to talk about are communication styles, right? And in this case, this is designed to be a visual model, okay? So what this is this is an axis, and it talks about direct and indirect and emotional and unemotional communication, okay? So again, if I'm talking about the culture norms here in the United States, right? In the United States, we tend to rely on direct, unemotional communication, which is that bottom quadrant, okay? Which means that we say what we mean, right? And we don't bring a lot of ourselves into it. Like, leave that messy humanity at the door, okay? Just come in and be really professional, right? We're all familiar with that. So that's great, but it's only one quadrant in this map. And again, not everyone exists within that quadrant. In fact, again, using myself as an example, I use an indirect emotional communication style, which means, again, not only do I bring my full self into it, I bring a lot of emotion and I tell a lot of stories. In fact, indirect emotional, like when we look at different culture groups, that's where storytelling tends to live, is actually up in this quadrant. And when we look at, again, our different BIPOC partners throughout the state of Wisconsin, and again, this could be Native American, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Hmong, right? They tend to not live in this bottom quadrant. Like, and I'm not trying to generalize, right? But culturally, these are culture groups that tend to exist elsewhere within this map. And so when we think about how we are connecting to people, how we are teaching people, how we are recruiting people, how we are communicating in any space, but particularly within public health, which is about people and it's about groups of people, right? We should be very mindful of our communication style and how others may be communicating differently. So there are two more models that I'm going to show you before we get into the CDC map of how to tell a story, okay? Because this is really necessary for doing this work. Like, you're here today because you care about storytelling, you care about cultural communication, and you fundamentally care about your community. I may not know you personally, but I think this is a truth that is true, right, for people in public health, for people in this kind of work. Like, we care deeply about people and we want to connect. Like, that's what coalition building is all about. And in order to do that, we have to start within ourselves. We have to go for ourselves and understand not only who we are, but how we feel and how we regulate that, and then how we present that to people. So this concept is actually called emotional intelligence. And really, it's just at its core an awareness of self, right? And your ability to control and express your emotions. And if you were looking at this visual model, you actually start in this upper right-hand quadrant, self-awareness. That's kind of where you start within yourself. What is your communication style, right? Like, what are your lived experiences? What is your culture, right? What are those feelings that you have? We start there, right? And from there, we move into self-regulation, which is your ability to manage yourself, right? Because we're human beings at the end of the day. So we're going to have feelings. We're going to be stressed out, right? We're going to love things or we're going to struggle with things. How do we manage that? right? Especially because we don't want to be reacting out of crisis. We want to be responding, right? From there, we move into empathy, which is your ability to recognize other people's emotions. So not only do we have emotions, but they have emotions as well. From there, we move into motivation, which is the desire to learn. It's the desire to grow. It's the desire to do better. You're here today because you have that desire. You have that growth mindset. And then we move up into social skills, which is your ability, again, it's a misnomer to say manage others' emotions, because really what it is it's your ability to not only recognize that they have them, but then to connect at a human level with them and build and grow a relationship from there. Now, I do want to point out when we're talking about emotional intelligence that, again, this is not only evidence-based, but research has found, right, that it's linked to increased empathy, right? It's linked to leadership skills, right? It's linked to, relationship building. Like, this is a super valuable thing that not only do we study, but we teach people because we've learned that this can help us in our work. The other piece of this is cultural intelligence. So cultural intelligence, again, it's another model, right? It just tells us, this is the core concept here is like, this is your ability to work with other people who are different from you, people who are culturally diverse and have different backgrounds and have different communication styles and have different ways of doing things effectively. And for those experiences to be valid to them and for you to care enough about them as a person that you still want to work with them. You want to understand, right? You want to connect, fundamentally connect, which again is, as humans, what we all want. So within this model, we do the same thing. We start in this upper right quadrant and we start with knowledge. So it's just like understanding of selves, right? We understand that there are people who are different from us fundamentally, right? Which we know, we've all experienced that, culturally, like just there are people who are different from us. And then from there, we move down, right? And the strategy component is like, what do we do with that? Like, now that we know that there are people who are different from us, how do we navigate that with intentionality, with purpose, right? Because we know we want to partner with them effectively. From there, we move into action. Action is like the ability to like actively work with them. Like, not only is it the desire, but like we want to actively collaborate with you, right? Which means that I might need to adapt my behaviors here. I might need to adapt how I talk to them, the kind of messaging that I use, how I present myself, right? And again, we see this, this is called code switching. There are a reason why cultural community groups here in Wisconsin have to fit into professionalism, right? And use whiter sounding names, right? Or change their hair, change their appearance, use different language to fit in. And the same goes for us as professionals. What can we do in order to create environments where people are more comfortable working with us and being different from us, right? And having cultural identities. And then from there, we go up to drive, right? And drive, again, it's the same thing as emotional intelligence. It's like the desire to do this work. It's the desire to care about people. It's the desire to collaborate. And again, you all know that I love health equity. This is something that I will talk about for the end of days, right? And it's the same thing. This is why we care about it, right? It's the desire to do better as people and to connect and communicate. So with that, I'm going to use the rest of our time today to talk about storytelling, specifically like what it is, not what it is, because we kind of covered that, but like how to do it. I really want to teach you like how to not only build a story, but tell an effective story. So this is a CDC model. It's not only skill-based, but it's evidence-based. And it's kind of 6 steps. And I'm gonna run us through all 6. So one is that you choose a point of view. And so this goes back to that primary concept of who is your audience, okay? Because we absolutely should adapt our messaging for who we're talking to. Whose story are you telling? Is it your story or is it somebody else's, right? And that brings up things like consent. Like, do we have permission to use that story, right? And then whose perspective? So are you telling it from a first person as if it is your story, or are you telling it from a third person? So I'm telling his story for him, okay? For example, I'm gonna use examples to kind of demonstrate this, right? I have a tobacco story, and today we're not gonna focus heavily on tobacco, although this does relate to it. We're here because of tobacco work. We use storytelling in the field of tobacco work, right? And so we wanna build those comfort levels. We wanna increase the skills, right? And so I will start off by saying, so choose a point of view. So I, right, have a tobacco story, which is a story that I like to tell, right? Step 2 is we're gonna establish the concept, okay? So all Western stories, and when I say Western, I mean like stories traditional to the United States. Okay, because there are some parts of the world that use different storytelling models. So this is for us here today. All Western stories involve conflict. They just do. Like something happens, right? Because something has to happen because we need something that we can resolve. And if we didn't have that conflict, it would be a very boring story. Like, what would we even be telling, right? So there's some kind of core component here. That's what the story is about, right? And within that, right, and again, this is a super effective plot device. And again, maybe conflict is the wrong word to use because conflict does not mean it's a negative story, right? It just means that we are telling the story for a reason. It's about something, right? And that's kind of what we're anchored around. And for example, like when we did our introductions, it was like a favorite holiday memory. So that would be that thing in the middle, okay? So within my personal experience of storytelling, right? So not only do I have a tobacco story, right? But my tobacco story is about my dad having lung cancer. Conflict. Step 3 is we shape that story. So the shape is how we structure it, right? Because stories, and again, Western stories, they have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end, okay? And we saw this. I'm going back to Terry's story. Like Terry's story had a middle and a beginning and an end. Again, so not only do we have that core thing, but how do we start that story, right? What are those key main points in the middle? Typically, when we say key points, we mean like 3 to 5, right? And then what's the conclusion? Because everyone likes a conclusion. Like when we end things on a cliffhanger, I don't know about you, but I don't find that as satisfying. Like I want to know what the resolution is, right? Plus, it helps listeners follow along, and we're so familiar with this style of storytelling that it just feels kind of natural to us. So for my dad's story, right, which is my story about him having lung cancer, which again was that conflict, right? His diagnosis was the reason that I got involved in tobacco prevention and control. And I got involved because I found out about his diagnosis, right? And a coalition where I lived, one of the coalition coordinator actually, who I knew and worked with professionally, he said, have you thought about coming in and telling your story? Had never even occurred to me that I would do that. And she said, listen, this might help you process those feelings. This might help you get through the grief, right? And it's powerful. This is a tool. You can help us do this work, right? Because I know how you feel about tobacco and we can use your story to create change at a community level, at a policy level. And I was like, wow, that would be a really great way for me to use this experience and move through it, right? And in fact, that's why I ended up getting into tobacco research. And in fact, that's why I'm here today, was because of that. That was my literal origin story. And did you see that? Did you notice how I went and I began to like, there was a beginning point here, which led to, right, me getting involved in coalition work, me getting involved in research, me being here today, end note. That's the frame, okay? Then what you want to do is you want to incorporate details. So they need to be really vivid. And again, I'm going to call on Terry for this because Terry did a really great example of this, where throughout her story, she'd be like really visceral. She would talk about sweating, right? And she would talk about armpit hair. And I was like enthralled. I'm like, I can picture it. Like I'm right there visually, right? And so you want those details. You want to show people. You don't want to tell them. You want to create like an experience where they're like in it with you, reliving it, right? And I'll give you an example of this. I wasn't living in Wisconsin when I found out that my dad had lung cancer. My mother called me up on the phone to tell me, which like, that's a hard phone call to receive, but I'm across the country. And during the phone call, not only did she tell me, but she said to me, I need you to move home. I need you to be here for your dad. And I need you to be here for the family. Which sounds like a really big ask, but again, I come from a collectivist culture, right? And without a doubt, that's what I was going to do. Without a doubt. I mean, of course, I was going to move home to be with my family and to be with my dad when they were going through this really difficult thing. Of course I would. Details, vivid. And this kind of ties into point 5, which is evoke the emotion, right? It is okay to take a risk and inject emotion into your stories. People connect to them more deeply. They feel more human. You don't want to just do the super boring resuscitation where you're super neutral and you're super professional and you're super detached. People aren't into it when you communicate like that. Now, here's the thing though, within academic and professional circles in public health, we don't like to inject emotion. We want it to be super sanitized. We want it to be really boring and really dry. Maybe that's why we don't use stories, right? Is because we don't take the risk to include the emotion into it. And if you're not comfortable sharing emotion, and that's okay, because remember, different communication styles, we don't all bring emotion into it. That's fair. Humor can be a really safe alternative, right? So if you're afraid to talk about how personal this is or how difficult this is, think about if there's a way you can make people laugh, right? Because everyone likes to laugh. And again, my example of evoking emotion, right, is that after moving home, I spent 1.5 years caretaking my dad at the end of his life. And it was a really painful experience. Like losing my dad to lung cancer was unlike any other experience I've ever had, and probably ever will have. He was my dad, right? And it changed me. Like it fundamentally changed me. Not only was it kind of a terrible thing to live through, right, but it actually changed my life, right? Because not only did I have the experience of that extra time with him, which I will always cherish, but it literally changed my career, right? It changed my purpose in life, because I walked through that experience and went, I don't want anyone ever to experience this again. Like this should be preventable. This should be something we can stop. Children should not have to grow up watching their parents go through this, right? We need to figure out how to change these cycles, which is why I got into the research. It's why I joined the coalition. It's why I'm here today. It's why I'm here today. How cool is that? That's the emotion. It's super real, and it's okay to go there. The last one is that you want to use a natural voice, right? Which means you want to use really plain language, right? Remember, most people read and speak at a 4th grade reading level. Public health, right? Academia, government, we like to get really formal and really fancy. I encourage you not to do that, right? Keep it really plain. You know, use a conversational tone, you know, and it's okay to have a range in your voice, right? But like, keep it really kind of relaxed, more like we're having a discussion, more like, again, conversational, like you would with a friend. And be direct, right? Use action verbs, like tell us that story. In fact, I just want to acknowledge that I just told you a story while doing this thing, right? And I kind of demonstrate each step. Like, did it feel like I was telling a story, or did it feel more conversational? Did it feel really natural? Like it just kind of fit in to what I was doing. That's what you want to do. You want to feel natural, like it flows with the conversation. So again, I'm just going to end on this note, which is that storytelling is a skill, right? It's okay to be uncomfortable with it. That's normal. It's very human, right? We all have different experience levels. We all have different communication styles. We all have different cultural backgrounds, right? You may be an extrovert or an introvert. That's all super valid, right? And I'm gonna encourage you, and I'm gonna challenge you to find ways to incorporate this into your work, because people connect with it. Right? We do better work when we use this, particularly as we think about, again, funders, particularly when we think about things like elected officials, right? Or, you know, partners who have experiences with disparities, or partners who maybe belong to a BIPOC identity, right? This can be very helpful in those situations. So here's what we're going to do now. I don't want to do all the talking, so we're going to actually do a think, pair, share, which is a skill-based practice. So I just taught you kind of why storytelling matters, some of these cultural factors. We went and looked at that CDC model of those 6 steps for building a story. And now what we're going to do is in this think, pair, share, we're going to start. I'm just going to give some context, and then we're going to do it. Is we're going to start by thinking of a story that we're going to tell. It's not going to be tobacco today. We're going to keep it really easy. It's a retreat, remember? So we're going to think of a story, and then we're going to map it out. And then we're going to actually break up into pairs in person and virtually, and we're going to practice sharing them. I promise it's not going to be as scary as it sounds. And then we're going to come back together for a large group debrief, and then I think we're going to be done for the day. So to start off, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want everyone to take 3 minutes. I'm going to time it out, 3 minutes. And I want you to think about a meaningful experience. And I'm going to give you a specific prompt here, okay? But before I do, not only do I want you to think about it, but I want you to like relive the memory if you can. I want you to go back in time. Think about the people. Think about the place. Think about the sounds and the smells. Like, what did it literally feel like to be in that? And your prompt for today is actually going to be one of your favorite memories of a winter tradition. We already started this, right? It could be that exact one. It could be a different one. Super low stakes. This is a story that you've already told us in a super miniature version of, but we're going to elaborate it. And we're going to practice using those CDC skills. So 3 minutes, starting right now, go back in time and just really relive it. Whenever we take 1 more minute. I'm going to bring us back. I do want you to just, as we're reflecting, right? And you don't need to answer this out loud, but I do want you to think about what that felt like. Go back in time and relive that experience of those wonderful moments, right? If it's Chinese and putt-putt, right? Or going to church, you know, for the evening service, or smashing eggs on your head, like whatever that thing was for you. Think about how it made you feel to just remember that story, even to yourself. Here's what we're going to do. And I hope everyone has something that they can write on, or some type of, you know, a device that they can take notes or draw on. Because what I want you to do now is we're going to take a couple of minutes, again, like 3 minutes, and we're gonna take everything that was just in your head and we're just going to put it on paper. Now, here's the thing. We're not going to write out a story. We're not doing that. I don't need full sentences. No one else is even going to see this, right? So you could write down words, you could draw pictures, you could do a word cloud where you like connect things. We literally call it an information dump. Where just take what was in your head, whatever it was. And again, go back to those CDC pieces. So what's that conflict? What's that core piece, right? Like what are the details, right? What are the things that make up the story? You know, in mine, I might write down egg, right? Head, you know, Easter, like whatever those things are, and just get it on paper. And then once you've got it on paper, I want you to start to organize it a little bit. And again, these are super rough notes. This is just a tool, a practice. Once you get it on paper, first information dump, then start to organize. Okay. And think what goes into the middle, what goes into the beginning, what goes into the middle, and what goes into the end. So I'm going to give us like 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to give us 3 minutes just to write information down. Okay. Don't map it out yet. Just put it on paper, starting now. 30 more seconds. Anything else? Just write it down. I see Nikki has stopped writing, so I'm going to use you as a barometer, right? Now, this is a really important step, okay? And again, not everyone likes to write things down, and that's okay. But the benefit of this, again, from a storytelling and from a CDC perspective, right, is it helps to kind of collect our thoughts, right? And to just kind of just start from there. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to start by just going straight into the formal writing or the formal telling of the story. We don't want to do that, right? Because it's, again, that can almost be a barrier. Like it can almost make it hard to even get started because, well, I don't know what story I want to tell. I don't know how I want to tell the story. I don't know what the impact is going to be, which is why you start by you think of what it is you want to say, right? And then you just get your thoughts on paper. There's no wrong answers. You might not keep everything you write down, right? You want to start there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a minute, and I literally want you to start to organize it again on paper, all right? And you can do this by writing numbers, like number 1, introduction, 2's for body, right? 3's for conclusion, or you can draw lines, right? Like really whatever you need to do to start to work. I mean, I've literally done projects where I'll take it and I'll tear it apart or even cut it apart and just move things around to figure out what goes in the beginning, what's in the middle, and what's at the end. So take a minute and just write a few notes of like where things could go in your story. If you're still working, that's okay, but I'm going to bring us back for the sake of time, because now what I'm actually going to have us do is I'm going to have us break out into partners. And it's okay if you're feeling nervous. It's okay. This is the purpose of this workshop, is we're learning and we're practicing, and there's no wrong answers when it comes to health equity. There's no wrong answers when it comes to storytelling, right? And what I'm going to ask us to do, so we're going to partner up, and the in-person people are going to partner up. The virtual people are going to partner up. So Nikki will do the tech for us. We're going to break out into 2-person groups. Okay. One person is going to talk for 3 minutes. Okay. The other person is going to listen. This is not a discussion. So you're not going to be asking questions, because active listening is a really important part of storytelling. You're listening to hear, not to respond. Okay. As a part of cultural communication. Nikki is going to give us a 1-minute prompt that you have 1 minute to wrap up your story. And it's going to go really fast, by the way. And then we're going to switch. Okay. And then the other person is going to have 3 minutes. Again, you talk, the other person listens. Nikki will give that 1-minute warning, and then she's going to bring us all back into the large group, and then we're going to have a debrief at the end. Okay, so this is your opportunity to come in and tell a story. And remember, beginning, middle, and end. We want that key content. Like, what is that core component of the story, that conflict? Try and take some risks, maybe. Bring in some emotion. Give us some of those details. Like, really tell it in that natural voice. Really have this be a real story, your story, of one of those favorite holiday memories that you have. All right, Nikki.
Where are you just going to keep track?
I have the timer.
Nikki, can you mute Judy for me?
We were just supposed to do one story during that time, right?
Yep, and now we're supposed to switch.
Okay.
And again, 3 minutes. Nikki will give you a 1-minute warning.
Oh, you missing him?
Hey, Teal.
Okay, Tia, I'm gonna reassign you to another room so there's even numbers. And then we'll start at 3 minutes now.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So thank you all so much for doing that. I hope that was a lighthearted, fun experience. I know I got to just listen to a story and it definitely, it made my day. I loved that sense of just learning and connecting. Wonderful, wonderful retreat. So I'm actually going to stop talking, but the last thing I'm going to leave us on, right, is this debrief. I'm actually going to turn it back over to Judy. Unless you want me to do this part, Judy.
No, I'm just winding up my story. Oh. You ready? So we want to just ask if anybody from this group or online, is there anything that you want to share up personally?
No, I'm just leaving the house. I had a.
Well, that was a good share. Does anybody want to share anything about their story? Anything that you want to share personally or from the group experience? Anybody want to share out?
Judy, I don't really want to share my story, but what I do want to share is how good this made me feel. And in the midst of all COVID and mental health and everything else, this was such an uplifting activity, and I thank you. It was very good. Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie.
I'll echo that too. I think that really ties into what she was talking about in terms of how we communicate, because sharing stories puts you on a really, almost like a friend building level in a way that you don't get to do in a professional. Like there are other stories I've been told, oh, it's still a professional setting, let's not do that. But the ones that you do tell, still, you still build that camaraderie and that understanding. Like I just learned a really cool thing, and not just about you, but about your family and history, right? And that's not something you get when you typically sit down at a meeting and do introductions. I'm not gonna typically tell my family story or something that's really gonna show my background and personality. I really appreciated the 3-minute opportunity to get to know some people.
There's a level of trust and vulnerability all at the same time that happens when you tell a story, a personal story. That emotional twinge that you get from that story that drives you. Yeah. Thank you, Jeannie. Anybody else have anything else they want to share about their experience?
This is Kath. I just wanted to raise up that point that was early on when we were talking about stories, and that some stories are valued more than others. And that I didn't know if I heard it correctly, but the statistical violence is what I heard. I'm not sure that that's what it was called, but that we really, I mean, I walk away from today's training thinking about the beauty of oral tradition, that whole concept of emotional and unemotional, direct, indirect, and that low context, high context culture. I find my background was in cultural anthropology, and it's just so awesome to be in a conversation where we're talking about the power of story, the power of tradition, the power of oral tradition, and what we can learn as we're moving through these civil rights experiences within the UW system, and just in our work, that the equity that we're thinking about it and having new tools and ways to present to our coalitions. It's been super, really good use of my time. Thank you.
I just want to add too, when people are talking about the oral traditions, but I really makes me like, I was planning to have Louise here, but for a little one, had a second vaccine yesterday, so he wasn't feeling so strong. Oh, I get that one. Yeah, so she was really bummed and wanted to be here, but I was so hoping to hear her perspective on the presentation and having so many close ties, because of course a lot of what they are based on is oral tradition. I'm so hoping she could be here, but if you help us reach out to her, I'm actually seeing her after work today, so I'll reach out to see if she can make a little synopsis for me before we go. We think about the times in COVID and how we don't connect as often, and as you know, as much as we would like to, storytelling can bridge that, bring us together more. Others, how did this make you feel? Or there's 2 messages in the chat. Miranda said that she got really emotional and it felt great to connect, and then Julie said, I agree that it felt good to remember and share it.
In the world of Zoom, it's difficult to connect, isn't it?
I think one thing too I like about this is part of oral tradition and storytelling is you get to share not only the experience they've had, but the memory of other people. So for those who, you know, are no longer available to share those, or maybe just aren't present in that space, even though it's going through your own translation, you get to share that, and then somebody else kind of gets to experience that person. Like I shared about my very, very crazy Bavarian uncle. Hopefully people get, he's all the way in Canada right now. You're not going to be able to experience him in person, but hopefully my story gets to share a little bit of just how intense he is and how wonderful that is. And that's just something that's really cool. You can share somebody, even though they're miles and miles and miles away. Oh my God.
Anybody else have anything that they would like to share? How did this go? How did you feel? What are your next steps? Bridget, I've enjoyed the storytelling podcast like the moth for a while, and it would be wonderful to get some instructions on how to develop a story of my own. Thank you, Teal, for the introduction. I think that's important too. This is, you know, when I've done storytelling classes in the past, you know, they've been 2 days long. And so, and then the class, that was 6 weeks long of a class. And I just think, you know, this truly is the beginning of something that we need to continue to expand and learn more about. So that'll be our challenge going into the new year, especially for our 7 Cs Coalition. Our challenge will be on how to maintain this and how to grow this experience as we move forward. So we look forward in Louise's, understanding of storytelling will be helpful to us as we do that.
Cool. It's a great application for social media engagement too, especially on platforms like TikTok, which are really, if you're in a lot of places nowadays, you can really short. And similar to Instagram stories, how I see some of those develop, 2 people will do like a series to tell like a short story, which is really cool.
Digital storytelling. Start a blog. We've talked about that. We have. Okay, well, if that's all, love you too, Debbie. If that's all, I think we'll just talk about next steps then quickly. We will email the link. And Tia, can we email your slides?
Yes, ma'am. And I will stay on in case anyone else needs to connect or wants to talk. I'm here for it.
Give us 48 hours. As you all know, Zoom, it takes us sometimes 48 hours. And here at La Crosse County, they save and make us jump through extra hoops because they just like to do that in IT. So give us a little extra time and we will get those links out to everybody so that you can have them. And I look forward to everybody. You can stay and connect with Tito a little bit more, or Nikki and I. Thank you for your time. This was our regular 7 Cs meeting time. So we're excited to know that we'll be meeting now, you guys, in January. Doesn't that feel weird? We will see you in 2022. Have a wonderful holiday and be safe driving home because it snowed.